And now, from a solar-powered shed in Rockland County, New York, the host of Stand Up, a freshly shaven Pete Dominic. Well, that's all you get for an opening. I'm sorry. Pete Coe is begged off for a couple of days here at the beginning of the week, and I'm left to do my own announcing, my own opening. I mean, can you believe this? What do I not pay him for? Well, I hope you had a great weekend, and happy Monday. It is the 17th of April. We are smack in the middle of the month. It's tax week, and I've got Maura Quint back joining me from Americans for Tax Fairness and Tax March, as well as the great Dr. Arthur Caplan back, bioethicist at NYU, joining me to answer a whole bunch of my questions. Dr. Arthur Caplan, Maura Quint, both join me on today's episode of Stand Up. I hope you had a good weekend. Mine was great. I got a lot done. Very busy weekend. Warmed up the audience at Last Week Tonight on HBO. Great episode coming on Sunday night on HBO. Speaking of which, I guess I'm loyal to the network because I caught up on episodes of Succession. I got a whole bunch of gardening done. Saw Julia's lacrosse game. We had some fun family time. And I got my consultation for the colonoscopy. That's right. Getting my first colonoscopy May 16th. Mark it down on your calendar. Give me any advice that you want. Not too worried about it. I'm excited for the drugs, if I'm being honest. But I also had to weigh in, and I topped 160 pounds for the first time in my life. And I think that it's time that I get motivated. It's been not a really healthy winter for me. I haven't really been eating very well, to be honest with you. Probably drinking too much, definitely not exercising enough. So I've got the big high school graduation for a whole bunch of my buddies. I've done it every year for the past 3 years. The first weekend in June, and I want to look good for all these guys. That's right. I'm going to get in shape in the next 6 weeks for both my colonoscopy and a whole bunch of dudes that I want to impress from high school. Well, really for myself. I shouldn't be making any improvements for anybody but myself. I truly actually believe that when you try to make changes for other people, you fail pretty quickly. At least that's been my experience. So I'm going to do this for me. Obviously, 47 years old. It's my 47th year. Time to get a little healthier over the next few weeks. I'll see how I do, and I'll report back to you. But anybody that wants to join me, you can. Eating better, exercising more, drinking less, continuing with my daily practice. I think I'll probably make it to Thursday before I revert back to some of the bad habits that I developed over the winter. No, I'm feeling positive. Let's do this, folks. Come on. I think I'm just talking to myself. And speaking of good stuff, got a great email from Kenton. Thank you very much, Kenton, for your email. I really appreciate it. He has struggled for years and has been talking to me on and off about what's going on in his life, and recently tried something new, which I think is pretty exciting, weird and different, but he's been meditating, and he took this psychedelic mushroom and says he had a mystical experience, an overwhelming, profound sense of connection with the universe, reality, time, everything. And he says this physiological change has been really profound. He says he's never been more present, probably because he says, I now understand this moment is all that there is. I've not felt a hint of the anxiety or fear that has plagued me for over 5 years. And he goes on to talk more about it, but it was really, really cool to get that email from him. And I don't know, maybe I should do some shrooms. I know some of you have had these kinds of experiences out there, but whatever it takes to get this kind of positive feeling that apparently he has. He writes, I love you, Pete. Truly, in the biggest, most pure way, you are a great human. Know that regardless of subscriber download count, you've positively impacted my life and so many others. And just give me a lot of credit for talking about all the meditation that I've been doing. And I just was really moved by that, Kenton. So I wanted to share that with people, not only because it made me feel good, but maybe to kick off a conversation about whatever works, because I'm going to be having more of those conversations here on the podcast. But really great to hear from him, and I would always love to hear from you. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com anytime. All right, a quick scan of the weekend news, and then we'll get to my guest, Dr. Arthur Caplan and Maura Quint. If you want to skip the news, my conversation with Caplan begins at about 15 minutes in, and my conversation with Maura Quint starts at about 39 minutes in. But now the news brought to you by you, the paid subscriber of Stand Up with Pete Dominic. I cannot do it without your paid subscription. There are over 700 of you that are subscribing, but I definitely need more to keep this going. So please go to standupwithpete.com or patreon.com/PeteDominic right now. You can always sign up to pay more per month if you're getting more out of it. All right, let's see. The big story last night, breaking around, 8 o'clock, was the Fox News defamation trial brought by Dominion Voting Systems that was set to begin tomorrow has been delayed, and there is concern and rumor that there is a possible settlement, which we don't want because we want to hear all of the big stars over at Fox News have to admit that they were lying. The trial, again, expected to start Monday in Delaware, but the judge, whose name is Eric Davis, announced it'll be delayed till Tuesday, according to a statement released Sunday night by the court. For more, let's go to Ayman Mohyeddin, who is always excellent over at MSNBC on Sunday night.
All right, we start this hour with some major breaking news. Just moments ago, NBC News learned that the start of the trial in Dominion Voting Systems' civil lawsuit against Fox has now been pushed back one day. It will now start Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern instead of tomorrow morning. Now, the cause of the delay is unclear at the moment. That means that in less than 48 hours, Dominion will finally square off in court against Fox, more than 2 years after filing a $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit alleging the network knowingly aired disinformation about fraud in the 2020 presidential election.
All right, so then Ayman Mohyeddin went to Katie Fang, who is my old friend, MSNBC star now, and lawyer herself, legal analyst. She is covering this case in Delaware, and I thought this was really good.
Katie, Dominion will need to, as I mentioned there, convince the jury that Fox acted with, quote, actual malice. Talk to us a little through what this means, how difficult it will be to prove.
So this is why everybody keeps on saying you're never seeing a case for defamation really go to trial, and you certainly don't see one that is allegedly this strong on behalf of Dominion. Actual malice, it's kind of one of these things that you can reel off the legal definition, and Ayman, you did a great job in your setup to this block in terms of what the definition is, but having a jury really understand it is going to be the nuanced trick for Dominion. It's the idea, as you said, that Fox put forth for its viewers to consume information that they knew was false, which, frankly, with Judge Davis's ruling on those motions for summary judgment, Dominion's going in already basically having that checked off, or Fox basically said, I'm going to have total reckless disregard. I'm just going to completely ignore whether or not there's truth going on with what we're putting forth to our viewers. And we're just going to put it out there.
Can I ask you really quickly about that
Sure.
point? Can the Dominion lawyers use the fact that the judge has already said that they clearly were saying false information, or will that not be allowed in the court?
So let me be clear. It's not like the Dominion lawyers are going to get up in front of the jury and say, hey, look at this judge. He's already said that everything that Fox did in this case was false. They're not going to do that. But Fox is hamstrung legally being able to raise certain defenses. And so even though you may hear certain key words throughout the course of the trial that Fox will try to convince the jury to think is a defense, at the end of the day, if it's not an available legal defense, then it's not like the jury is going to be able to come back and render a verdict that's inconsistent with the law. And that is why Dominion pretty much goes in. And if you were to hold up a verdict form, which a lot of us did as trial lawyers, Dominion could pretty much say, this is not true. And just like what Noah just said, Fox thinks you're basically going to just eat this up as a viewer. So here, you know what, jury, here you go. I want you to find liability, and I want you to put in all the zeros here when it comes to damages. But I don't want to be flippant here. Jury trials, they're a gamble on either side. I don't care what anybody says. That is why people talk about settling. And the fact that this trial isn't getting started until Tuesday, the judge has to agree to a delay of trial. So there's something going on here that is delaying the start of the trial. The Fox, I think, spokesperson saying it could just be logistics. But, you know, at this point, nobody knows.
All right, Katie Fang on MSNBC. I thought that was pretty interesting, so I wanted to share that with you. And what else do I have for you? A whole bunch of stories from Europe. How about that? Is that interesting to you? Thousands of people rallying in the Czech capital, Prague, on Sunday to protest high inflation and demand the government's resignation. And Ukraine, Russia, they exchanged POWs as Orthodox Christians celebrated a subdued Easter holiday. More than 100 Ukrainian prisoners of war have been released as part of a major Easter exchange with Russia, top officials said. And in France, the prime minister there, Macron, has signed a controversial pension changes into law after months of protests. The French president, not prime minister, has signed its controversial pension reform into law, defying 3 months of protests and pleas from unions not to implement the legislation. And in Germany, they ended their reliance on nuclear energy by shutting down the last remaining nuclear power plants. But in Finland, they opened a nuclear power plant. So that's pretty interesting, I thought. And finally, in Europe, out of the Vatican, the Pope Francis has to deny claims that another Pope, John Paul II, prowled for underage girls, like one specifically missing teen named Emanuela Orlandi. It's a fascinating story and rumors and suspicion and conspiracy that I read one article about and don't want to know too much more, but thought I'd mention it. And two fun stories to end on. In Oregon, a man was stopped by police Tuesday after he tried to, quote, gift strangers money by tossing $100 bills on a busy highway from his car window. That's right. Police received multiple phone calls about bills just floating on a busy Interstate 5 toward the south end of Eugene, Oregon, about 120 miles south of Portland around 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday. According to a news release from the Oregon State Police, multiple vehicles stopped on the road and people left their cars to grab the cash because it was $100 bills. And it sounds like a weird, generous, very, very dangerous thing to do, to have people running around chasing money on a busy highway. But still, I wanted to mention it to you. And finally, I thought this was the weirdest yet most interesting story that I had to read two articles about. A Spanish extreme athlete has emerged from a cave after spending 500 days with no human contact in what could be a world record. What? Yeah, go read all about it. Beatriz Flamini left the surface to live 230 feet underground November 2021 as part of a project that also gave scientists and psychologists a chance to investigate the impact of living alone underground for a long time, including the effect on her circadian rhythm. Well, if I were, I'd be really excited about like 3 seasons of Ted Lasso to binge. Anyway, I thought that was a fascinating story and wanted to mention that one for you too. All right, so those are the stories you might not have heard about, and that's why I wanted to include them on the roundup here. That's all I've got for you, but before we head into my pretty serious conversations with Dr. Caplan and Maura Quint, although we always had a lot of laughs, let's check in with Michael Che and Colin Jost over at Weekend Update. Here's a few of the jokes that I selected, and there's a very ageist theme here going on, I think, but take it away, boys.
President Biden is trying to downplay the recent leak of classified U.S. documents that were posted on social media because when you're over 80, a couple of leaks is nothing to be embarrassed about. After a judge's ruling left access to abortion pills uncertain, some state officials are stockpiling them just in case. Officials like California Governor Gavin Newsom, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, and New York comedian Michael Che. President Biden traveled to Ireland this week and is being called the most Irish president since Kennedy. In fact, Biden has so much Irish blood that he doesn't need a drink to slur his words. Wow. Did I get your people?
Easy. Senator Dianne Feinstein, who is 89, is facing calls to resign from fellow Democrats. But unfortunately, Feinstein is answering those calls on her stapler.
Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina announced the launch of an exploratory committee for a 2024 presidential run. That name again is Tim Scott, as in Tim Scott. No chance of being a nominee.
All right, there you go. Weekend Update, Colin Jost, Michael Che. And now it's time to get to my first guest. Coming up, a great conversation with Maura Quint. But first, I've got one of the most respected bioethicists. He's a professor of bioethics at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Before he is now at NYU. He's the author and editor of 35 books, more than 860 papers in peer-reviewed journals. He's always writing columns and very prominent news outlets. I mentioned a couple of them today, including the Boston Globe, Market Watch. He's served on all kinds of different committees. He's won all the awards. He's got all kinds of honorary degrees. And for some reason, he still agrees to join me to take all of my important questions about bioethics, health policy, and so much more. We had a great conversation. I think you're really going to like it. He's no longer on Twitter, but I linked to his website in the show notes. You can learn more about Dr. Arthur Caplan there. I always love our conversations, including this one where I learned a lot. Let's do it right now. Oh, look who I've got. One of the most respected, the GOAT of bioethics, Art Caplan. Hello, sir. Thank you for joining me.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm very happy to see you. It's been far too long since we discussed things and stuff. You've been writing, you've been talking. No shortage of issues in the world of bioethics ever, really, right?
Absolutely. Hey, one thing I did, I don't know what you're thinking, is I went off Twitter. I just said, I can't take this anymore. Musk is driving me nuts. And probably a month or so ago, I just said, I'm out of here. I noticed NPR went off. I don't know. It looks like
I saw that. You went off a while back. I think even before the last time I talked to you. But my thing is, you can do that because you're at NYU. You got this big job. NPR can do that because they're an established network. Independent content creators and journalists and people who are trying to basically sell widgets, that's a much higher threshold when it's one of your main marketing tools and you don't have a platform.
There is no alternative. There's no doubt about that. But
yeah,
still, that guy, I understand why people, and I will tell you that in my own department, I think I'm the only one who left. The way he's managing that in terms of promoting hate speech and bringing back his ideological buddy. Well, you know the story. It's just, I don't know.
It's terrible. I've been trying to focus on the other things that I consume, support, and buy that are horrible as well to make myself feel better. My continued devouring of most animals somehow outranks me still being on Twitter.
Please do not go there. I am guilty. I am guilty.
Not to mention,
what I've done is I've tried to not eat veal, reduce a few meals of meat, but
sir, are your veal reduction is going to win you an award, a humanitarian award at the end of the. You know what? Well, here's what we're doing. This happens a lot. We keep getting packages delivered that have like a bottle of nail polish. Like a tiniest item in a big old envelope and box that a dude drove here, that a dude walked up to my house, and I open it, and it's the tiniest item in a huge piece of packaging, and that's when I throw my hands up. And
there is a term, by the way, for the I can't stop eating meat, or I don't really want to exercise as much as I should, and that sort of stuff. It was from Aristotle. It was called akrasia, AKRASIA. What it means is, I know what's right to do. I just lack the willpower. I think that's where I am. I was even with that on Twitter for a while, although I finally get it. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, there's a whole slew of, if you will, small operations that rely on that to get the word out about their programs or whatever they're doing. It's sort of what there is. It unfortunately just happens to be a sewer, but okay.
You also fly around on your jet a lot. I think you should have mentioned.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And I can use my celebrity promotions. Gwyneth Paltrow is often over here, and I ask her to stop talking about her vaginal eggs and maybe mention one of my columns, that sort of thing.
Have you ever taken her to task?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the woman is a public health menace, and she gets away like Teflon. She's pretty. She's clearly rich. She's clearly connected in Hollywood. No one speaks up about her crackpot, dangerous ideas, and she's got plenty of them. I think she was promoting ozone rectal therapy enemas at one point. She had this, let's put plastic eggs in her vagina to control something. I'm not sure what it was. The woman is just making a fortune out of misinformation, probably has a bigger public health footprint than anybody I can think of. And, she's on talk shows. People love her. We all wonder what her next TV or movie thing is going to be, la-di-da.
I find it really.
Who else gets a pass on this is Aaron Rodgers.
Go ahead.
The NFL quarterback guy. He won't vaccinate. He just came out and endorsed RFK Jr. for president, which is, the equivalent of endorsing the Mad Hatter for president. And this is a guy who, spends 4 nights in the dark to make a decision about where he's going to play football, but that's his thing.
But I think
he also promotes absolutely crackpot.
Yeah, and I think he's bad. I think he's really bad, but arguably he's not making a huge profit off of selling supplements that don't work or that make you think they work or they don't work as well as it seems like when you say public health menace, to me in a lot of radio shows and podcasts obviously sell that kind of bullshit. I could not take the money from a company. And I had a hard time. I was doing it earlier on the podcast. I have a really hard time. But specifically when you're putting something in your body, a supplement or on your body, on your skin, that you're going to lose weight, your skin's going to be younger or different, and it doesn't work. The idea that I would use my voice, much less allow that myself to make money off that, ethically, that is where I definitely draw the line. But you say she's a public health menace. That's strong words.
Well, saying don't vaccinate, use immune boosters. There's no such thing as an immune booster. Arguing that you should use cleansings to try and control colon cancer. How about we all get a colonoscopy, maybe to try and control? I'm signed on.
Getting my consult tomorrow, Doc.
There you go. I mean, it goes on and on. You go to her page and just run down the list, and she's basically saying, you don't have to do X because I'm going to sell you Y. And Y turns out to be non-evidence-based, totally commercial. She has a vested interest in promoting it, so this gigantic mountain of conflict of interest. I worry that, she's encouraging people to delay going to the doctor when they have symptoms, and she's promoting phony health prevention activities that are just costing people money and not doing them any good. Other than that, she's okay.
The irony about that court case against her is she's now Goop has come out with a giant plastic bubble that inflates like an airbag if you're about to get hit by somebody that wants to sue you on slopes, which I think that seems to work, though. So that one I have no issue with. You just got to know if somebody's about to hit you. Let's talk about the current landscape of abortion access in America. So that's my big, larger question before we drill down on the issues regarding the pills. I talked with Dr. Aaron Carroll about this last week, but I want to get your take. Of course, how do you see the landscape post Dobbs in terms of access? I read that the North Carolina legislature, because this woman was Democrat, flipped to Republican, thus throwing the power to Republicans, thus overcoming a veto of the governor as a Democrat, meaning, Art, that it could shut down the entire Southeast's access to abortion. So that seemed like a pretty big headline that I haven't heard many people talk about. But what's your take on the current sitch?
Well, basically, half of America has some limit that usually is around 6 weeks. Florida just passed that, or nothing. So, and at least 20 South Carolina legislators have a bill pending to offer the death penalty to anybody who performs an abortion, which seems somewhat not pro-life in my crude understanding of where that might be. But Dobbs was a ridiculous decision because it basically went against not only established jurisprudence, but it introduced all sorts of non-scientific facts, including the idea that fetuses were viable, much younger than 20 weeks. They're not. We know they're not because they don't have any lungs. They breathe like mermaids in amniotic fluid inside the mom. That's the limit on viability. And to start making up facts, it's sad. So, all right, they returned the authority to the states. The states are restricting abortion left and right. These are decisions, I believe, that still are fundamentally ethical and should be a woman's choice. If you don't like abortion, then you persuade the woman not to do it. Period. What's this outlaw the procedure? What's that all about? If you can't win the moral mind of the woman and persuade her, don't end this pregnancy, then your arguments, I think, need to be beefed up. But this should be a personal decision. I'm not saying you can't challenge what a woman thinks. You can ask for an explanation. You could try to, give different reasons. But you know what we got, Pete? All over these states that are restricting abortion, they're just making up scientific claims, totally making them up. Mifepristone, the abortion pill, it's not safe, says some judge in Amarillo, Texas. The FDA looked at this thing for years, gave it an approval 20 years ago, has been collecting data. The pill is safer than Viagra or ibuprofen. Side effects wise, it's got no profile. They revisited the whole thing in 2016, reestablished the same safety profile. This judge all of a sudden is jumping up and down saying, I'm not persuaded. I have some special pipeline to evidence, and I don't think it should have been approved. It's just sad on its face. And you know what I can't believe? I can't believe that organized medicine isn't screaming bloody murder about this intrusion into their authority, into their professionalism, when, these states make up things like embryos are tiny people. An embryo has a 50% chance of becoming a person. 50%. That means half of them are miswired and they don't make it. It's true that every life begins a conception. It is not true, factually, that every conception begins a life, because the half of them fail. Let's get the facts out there, folks. Where are our doctors and our scientists screaming a bit more loudly about this? And we're going to really let judges, some of whom may have had some high school science, I don't know, maybe, start to tell us what is medically true or what scientific evidence is about drugs?
This judge decided that the FDA was wrong 20 years ago.
Yep.
And you mentioned the other drugs that are even more dangerous, like Viagra and ibuprofen, which, by the way, don't take those two together, because I did. And my balls swelled up. But that might have been something else. The point being that judges are deciding about a medication that the FDA approved 20 years ago, and that seems to be I can't understand the precedent there. Is that new, that judges are deciding whether a procedure, a treatment, a tool, or a drug? I mean, usually these things are, if something's dangerous, it's people file lawsuits.
Correct. Now, this is the first time in history of the United States that a judge has overruled the FDA. First time. Never happened.
Yeah.
If you let that stand, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Other people are going to show up. You know what? I don't like the fact that Pete has a medical prescription for marijuana. I don't like marijuana. I think Pete should tough it out and basically learn to live with his many illnesses. Let's not go into that in detail, but,
back pain. I've got back pain. No, this is true. I've talked about it. I got a cannabis prescription 3 years ago, and I told the guy who I talked to over video phone that I had back and neck pain, and he's like, "Okay,
so let's pull it, because I don't like it, and I don't care what the FDA says, and I don't care what any scientific authority says. I'm going to judge shop, which is what they did in Texas. Yeah. They found some pro-life guy, and basically he starts firing up these rulings that have to do with his ideology, not the science. So it is not only a threat to women's reproductive choice, it's a threat to the entire system of drug approval. Yeah. You'll love this. You know who's screaming in the background the loudest
Ted Cruz
against this judge? The pharmaceutical industry, because they don't want the system overturned. It means all of their drugs are at risk of having some kook show up and say, I don't like that. I don't like what you're doing. All of the FDA.
That's a really interesting point, of course. But I mean, you came on this show back sometime last year after Dobbs came out, and you said the difference between abortion being illegal now than, say, 20 or 30 years ago was these medications, these pills. You can take a pill to terminate your pregnancy. And now, as we're talking about, that there's been a lot of legal developments, depending on what hour you're watching. But we're apparently the Fifth Circuit granted access now. We'll see what happens with this. But you wrote a piece at the Boston Globe about how to opinion piece that you co-wrote with Lisa Kearns, how to retain access to abortion pills thanks to the right wing. So there's a solution here, but I do think it's worth mentioning that you said, hey, we still have the pills. And of course, now they've come for the pills.
I was a little bit surprised that anybody would be cuckoo enough to try and pull the FDA approval. That just even shocked me, and I'm used to every cuckoo nutty thing happening on the abortion front that you can imagine. But to basically say, to hell with the FDA, to hell with drug approval, to hell with evidence, we don't like it, so out the window it goes. And, even that liberalization you're talking about in the Fifth Circuit, it basically says things like, no, you can only use it up to 7 weeks. Nope, you can't use it from telemedicine. Nah, we're not comfortable with a pharmacy stocking. Oh, you got to have a doctor prescribe it, I think, 3 times. Since when did they get into the practice of medicine? Now we're going to have judges sit there and tell us, oh, here's how to use this pill, but not over there. Don't do that. What's that from? The University of Gwyneth Paltrow? I mean, where's that coming from?
Paltrow you.
Anyway, there is a path. My friends on the right have been screaming for years. They don't want the FDA to restrict what they call off-label prescribing. So once a drug is approved, any doctor can prescribe it literally for anything. Most doctors don't do that because, if you have a bad side effect, you can get in trouble in a malpractice suit for prescribing something for a different reason than the one that was approved. But they say things like, I don't need the nanny state. I don't need approval from anybody to work with my doctor. If I want to give this drug for anxiety to my kid and the doctor prescribes it, it wasn't approved for kids, but okay, we're going to go with the idea that it's probably okay and my kid needs it. Well, great. Guess what? The abortion pills are approved for a variety of weird medical conditions. I won't even bore you with them. One is called Cushing syndrome. It doesn't matter. They have other uses besides abortion. Great. All you have to do is go to any doctor anywhere and say, hey, give me that off label. I'm not using it for an abortion. Trust me, we might get a big explosion in the number of women suffering from Cushing's disease from like 11 to maybe 2 million, but it's on the books. Conservatives have fought to keep it that way. They keep saying, got to give doctors freedom to prescribe off label. So it is a real pathway, if it comes to that we could pursue it.
It's really interesting, as you guys read it, they made the bed. Now they have to lie in that bed in terms of creating this policy of off-label drugs being prescribed for other purposes. They argued for it. They got it. And now what you're saying is, well, let doctors then prescribe this same pill for other purposes. But in effect, they're really terminating their pregnancy. That's what you're saying?
Exactly. And, the reason pro-lifers hate these pills so much, you can't go to a clinic and demonstrate. There's no pictures of dismembered babies. These drugs work before 10 weeks. There's not much there. And women can get the pill from any doctor. You don't have to go to some OBGYN. You get it prescribed by your dermatologist, by your allergist, by whoever. So it really threatens the idea of lifestyle ad. We're going to control this by making sure you can't get to a surgical abortion at a clinic. Where are you going to demonstrate? So this path that I'm suggesting is real, it's a last ditch one. By the way, one other one is to just import these pills from overseas, another favorite of many on the right. Give us the freedom to get drugs from Canada. Give us the freedom to buy drugs wherever we want. Okay. France has these pills. Ireland has these pills. There are plenty of places you could go ship them.
Really, I think I was talking, you were the one who told me about in Ireland when abortion was illegal, they were using drones, little drones to drop off the pills.
Correct.
Lastly, I do want to ask you about this. Yeah, I haven't heard anybody really talking about this. This is really important. You wrote an opinion piece over at Market Watch. It's titled, Americans are obsessed with China's COVID cover-up. We should be furious, but it should be about the censorship that happened here in the U.S., because everybody knows about China's censorship. But you write about the CDC's scientists being bullied into silence at critical moment in the pandemic. This is from New York Times reporting. I didn't even know about this reporting. And you say it can never happen again. You're demanding for investigations. I haven't heard any policymakers, congressional legislators demanding for these investigations. Maybe they have too much on their hands, but this would seem like a pretty high priority. What are you saying? What do we learn?
I'm basically saying, I don't know about China. Maybe they covered up. I don't know whether things started in the Wuhan lab from a leak. I don't know whether it was a bunch of weird animals, raccoon dogs, something I never heard of in my life. Maybe you know about them. Pangolins, other strange creatures that somehow see, bats. Anyway, it doesn't matter, because what you're going to do is you got to respond to both of those possibilities and regulate and monitor accordingly. So who cares? Now, is China censoring? Yeah, they won't let us back in to examine, and they've basically gone quiet because they're pissed off at us for various reasons. The Trump administration, when this outbreak first came and started to kill us, the CDC director's name was Nancy Messonnier, came out at some press conference and said, this thing is bad, and it's really something we've got to prep for. Within a day, the Trump administration said, no more comments from you. Everything has to go through Mike Pence's office. Mike Pence? Mr. Science? Mike Pence? That Mike Pence? I mean, this is right out of like Dostoevsky or something. The commissar will now vet your opinions.
Mike Pence, the man who once wrote an op-ed arguing that tobacco is not dangerous for you because funded by the tobacco people. Yes. Yeah, that guy. He's big on science.
And the Times found out that a lot of junior people at the CDC were meeting in a park and talking to one another and saying, we got to get the truth out about this. It's going to kill people. Trump is walking around saying, don't mask. Trump is walking around saying it's going to be gone by summer. Trump is walking around saying, well, I'll drink bleach. We can't put up, boom, all of a sudden, all censored. Are we ever going to take a look at the censorship of science in the Trump administration, which I think poses a little bit more of a risk to us than whatever the heck the Chinese are doing about the Wuhan lab? As I said, I'm not sure I even care, because you want to protect against both scenarios there anyway. We had government basically shutting up science. Even Rand Paul was trying to shut up Tony Fauci. It is beyond me that we haven't had one hearing, one attempt to form a commission, nothing.
We need a letter writing campaign. The primary focus of American inquiries, you write, ought to be, when did American scientists believe they knew important information about COVID? Who prevented them from sharing their opinions? And how do we ensure that form of censorship never happens again? It hardly matters what the origins of the novel coronavirus were and how it spread if our own scientists and public health officials are not permitted by our government to talk freely. Seems pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. And, I know there are a lot of people out there who are not jumping up and down about science these days. You wait for the next pandemic and one will come, and you're going to wish that we had taken a look at this censorship issue.
The great Art Caplan. So great catching up with you. I really appreciate you joining me whenever you do. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pete.
All right. He's a smart guy, huh? Art Caplan, everybody. Always so grateful for his time, and I try to catch up with him every, 4 to 6 weeks or so. Really one of the smartest guys I know, and I love talking to him and hearing from him. Great guest on the show for a really long time. And speaking of a long-time great guest, let's get to Maura Quint. She joins me pretty regularly right here on Mondays, although we haven't talked in a few weeks, so I was very happy to catch up with her. We talked a little bit about spring. We talked about tax season, of course, and more. Another great conversation with the always brilliant Maura Quint. You should follow her on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, where she is one of the best. Let's do it right now.
Let's start with this. It is tax day this week, and Maura tweeted, a fat bumblebee keeps bumping into the window trying to get inside and ignores me explaining that outside with the sun and fresh air and flowers is where he wants to be. So I'm holding my laptop up to the glass to show him I'm doing my taxes and convince him this is the bad place. Happy spring, Maura. Happy tax season. I love it.
happy spring. All of the things refresh and replenish. The trees and the flowers and the federal budget. Yay.
Wow, it sounds like you're really feeling replenished.
I'm so chipper and cheery. Everyone can just feel it like oozing off of me these days. I think I've gotten like 3 random texts of like, are you doing okay? Like, for no reason. Just that's the air I'm putting out in the world right now.
Do you have any spring memories? You mentioned the bumblebee. Were you stung by bees? Was this an exciting time as a little girl growing up in Pennsylvania?
I never had much attachment to like spring. I always liked fall. I was like, let me watch things die. And now I'm comfortable. Now I get it. We're all being like, peace out. Like, let's just do one big splashy show and then just quit and be done. I'm on board. But this whole like, oh, let's like slowly open to the world and let this sunshine nurture. Like, I don't understand any of that. That is counter to my whole being.
It sounds like what you see when you see new blooms and blossoms. You want to look at them and be like, oh, you guys have no idea what's coming.
You're going to be dead in like 6 months.
You're not going to be so bright and smiley come October.
I'm not trying to ruin this whole deal for you, but not only are you going to be dead in 6 months, you're going to be like sweating and wilting the whole goddamn time.
It's going to be hot too.
Some kid's going to step on you. Some dogs are going to pee on you. You are not in for anything fun. But you look pretty.
I am currently planting flowers outside the girls' bedroom windows.
Oh,
so when
adorable.
They open their shade in the morning, they will see a panoply of color.
What kind of flowers are you planting?
Several different kinds, but mainly I've got a big sunflower array, but I'm going to get a bunch of different flowers in the next couple of days because I've got all the boxes set up or planters set up outside their windows. A little experiment. Ava's last spring will be flowers.
I think that is absolutely lovely. That sounds wonderful. You're very, very nice. That's sweet. That's
wonder
like fairy tale.
I wonder if any sensory memories ever, those efforts are made. That's why I asked you about spring, if you remember anything specifically about that. But I mean, like,
I will say, since you're talking about like a father-daughter element, the one thing I do feel or that I do have with spring is my dad always getting really excited when he started seeing robins. Like always, we all had to come outside and come see the robins that were in the yard because spring was coming.
Maura, there's a robin out here.
Yeah.
Why does he sound like Montgomery Clift, your dad?
I don't know. It was an interesting upgrade. He normally does not. I was going to say what he sounds like, but there's a lot of beer involved usually.
I like that. I like that he got excited about the birds. That's a time that you remember that. That makes me feel good. So maybe there's some hope with some of these things. Well, it's also a big time for you professionally because you look at tax policy all year long. And so I thought it might be good to touch on that. Where are we at with our efforts on tax policy at the state level, at the federal level, from activists on up? This is a fun time of year to look at people thinking about what they make and pay versus what other people make and pay, and then get really upset.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. We can get really upset. Except that like it, oh gosh. Oh, did you hear me? Did you hear that I was about to like put a bit of hope into the world and then I felt terrible?
Go ahead with it. Go back to the hope. Tell us what the hope was.
Except that it is getting better from a tax policy standpoint in terms of the amount of support that we are seeing from electeds. So we have been on this trajectory since, who knows what people want to pin it to, but I would say once we had Bernie Sanders out there in sort of 2016,
right,
talking a lot about millionaires and billionaires and started to really move that into the collective conscious. And then once we hit the 2020 electoral point and we were looking at the Democratic primary, we were looking at, for the first time ever, an entire slate of candidates who were all coming with different proposals to increase taxes on the rich. It became this thing that actually got embraced by the left. And now, we're working on a lot of legislation, one of which being the billionaire's minimum income tax. And we're seeing more and more people, more and more senators and House members want to get on board with these policies and sign on. And that's exciting. That's encouraging. And then, we also had President Biden put out his budget, whatever that was a month ago, or I don't know, it could have been 5 years ago, or it could have been yesterday. I have no idea. But it definitely happened. Like a real thing that happened. And when he did that, I mean, look, there's lots of stuff in there I don't like, but he had multiple proposals for increasing taxes on the rich. And so that was good to see. We're definitely starting to be in a better place, at least from a political perspective and a narrative perspective. And we're seeing elected Democrats actually start to embrace these things and push for some of these policies. And that is great. And it means that what the rest of us have been doing is working. Keep screaming at them, keep getting mad at them, keep telling them they have to, because they're not going to do any of this on their own. It means that enough of us have been angry for long enough and have been holding them to the wall on it. And they're starting to go, oh shit, in order to be electable, I have to do this. And that's good.
I'm sure there's many different ways to frame an economic argument, a tax argument, in a culture war framing if you wanted to. But people don't usually think of tax policy as culture war, do they? Because my question is, it's really hard to get people fired up. You've been working, making it your living to get people to care about tax policy, as have I really in a lot of ways, because I've used it as an example of, hey, this is such an important issue. We have to find ways to make it sexy to talk about. You've done that for years and years. But how do you get people to think and care about this consistently when their voting rights and reproductive rights and other kind of the culture war issues are distracting and certainly animating people and getting better rate and bigger ratings on your shows, et cetera?
Well, so that is fundamentally one of the things that I have been working to do. I mean, there's lots of people doing this work. I'm not saying I'm the only one. I'm saying this has appealed to me personally as something that I have tried really, really hard to do. And that is to try and make it clear and try and make sure that people really understand that tax policy is this central hub policy that affects all of the others. And it is it's a keystone piece that no matter what issue it is that you take to heart and that you lean in on and that you go to march for or go to battle for, whatever it may be, that you recognize that it requires this tax piece too. And it requires it for two reasons. One, we can have a whole conversation about modern monetary theory, and some people love it and some people hate it. And I'm not trying to, to argue it one way or the other. I am, however,
MMT, look it up.
MMT. I mean, I will happily argue it in favor of it. But
do you know Stephanie Kelton?
What?
Stephanie Kelton?
Mm-hmm. She wrote the book. Yeah.
She wrote the book about that, right?
Yeah.
I just say, because I know you just saying it is going to arouse the Sandman, who's a longtime listener and is always lobbying me to talk to Stephanie Kelton. So I appreciate you just mentioning it and that you support it. But, and you were making another point, but I had to just jump in there on that. We could talk forever about MMT, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, MMT is a governing sort of thought philosophy on how our finances work. But the point is not everyone's bought into that. So I'm not arguing in favor for it or against it. I am, however, saying that what we have right now as a governing body of policies is we keep getting these things like, the pay-go policy that got put into place where we have to pay for any new services that we want to provide and things like that are outside of the MMT world. And in that framework, the one that is actually operating on our legislative processes right now, taxes are the answer, because you'll constantly hear, and you're going to hear, it's going to ramp up real loud, real soon. A lot of people on the right saying, well, sure, we'd all love a pony, but who's going to pay for it? We can't afford these things. We can't afford nice things. Oh, you want to go to the hospital and not die? Well, you should have thought of that before you picked your parents. Why didn't you know that eventually you would need ongoing diabetes medication? You should have simply been born rich. But, we don't have that as an option. You can't retroactively go back, and they keep telling us that we're not supposed to rob banks for some reason. And I'm not entirely sure why. But that being the case, we need to have these
violently.
services.
Maybe don't put a mask on and run in with an AR-15 and shoot innocents like most movies. Just rob the bank like more thoughtfully and less violently is all.
Hey, you want me to get real political?
Yes.
These days, Pete, not wearing a mask is the violent action that you could be taking in that bank.
I meant.
Anyway,
outside of robbing a bank, we should. Yeah.
Right. No, we should be investing our money into services that take care of people and that help people and that look after the most vulnerable in our society. And we have the money to do all of it. We have the money to do all of it. We can do all of it. And whatever it is that you're trying to do, it probably requires some sort of investment. And the funds for those investments are here. They are simply right now in the coffers of the wealthy. And we need to rechange our tax policy so that the rich start paying into the system at fair rates like everyone else. And once they do, then we have this excess of revenue that can be invested back into people. So it's all right there. So for that reason, I think no matter what your issue is, the thing that really makes you passionate and makes you want to get involved, tax policy probably is worthwhile and worth knowing and worth adding into your cause. And then the other reason is that right now, right now, we just saw this report come out of ProPublica. We saw this, a ridiculous billionaire. Come on, Harlan Crow. Who'd heard of Harlan Crow before? It's like they made him up. That's the most absurd possible name for buying a Supreme Court justice, right? Anyway, we have
Hello,
these billionaires.
I'm Harlan Crow. Welcome to my retreat.
You don't hear a lot of Harlans anymore. Whatever happened to that?
It is. You're so right. And it's really hard not to just go off on a tangent riffing about all of these billionaires who are running the world the way that they are. And how a Hollywood screenwriter would be like, nah, this is too much. This is too much.
Harlan Crow. It's definitely a replace later. Just put that in as find and replace. I just went with the most ridiculous racist name I could find. But no, we'll put in something less on the nose. And then no one went and fixed it. Is definitely how that feels. But so you have these billionaires, and we keep learning about new billionaires all the time. It's so exciting because every time we learn about them, we learn about the fact that they have bought some part of our democracy. They were just oh, I was kind of bored. And so I was oh, I'm going to buy a new lipstick and a senator. I don't know. It's kind of a whim. I'll probably regret it, but the return policy is exhausting. It's absurd. But that's the only time we ever hear about billionaires is just a constant state of, oh, look, they're fucking up our lives in this other way. And here you go. Guess what an answer to that is? There's lots of answers. And I'm certainly not saying that we shouldn't do all of the other answers, some of which require a little craftsmanship on our part, some hammer, some nails. It's fine. But, if we're not going that route, then I think, right now, the most accessible route that we have in front of us is tax policy. Because billionaires, they do spend money just cause, honestly. And they are concerned. And when you start to tax them, they still have more money than God.
Yeah.
But it does affect their spending behavior. Even if they still can afford all of it, they start to sort of make different choices. And so we can actually begin to use tax policy to start to wrangle our democracy back into a democracy, one where people actually have some power, because right now it is being purchased entirely away. But once we start limiting the purse strings of the purchasers, then there's more democracy left for the rest of us.
Really well said. Both reasons, just to recap, it's you can make a huge difference when you spend money responsibly, as we did in 2021 on a child tax credit, which brought child poverty down by rates, huge rates never seen before in this country, and a very effective tax credit that everybody knew would work. It's always worked. It did work. That's one thing. The other thing that we can do if we tax billionaires is prevent them from buying our democracy, buying entire networks and newspapers, consolidating them, and as you mentioned, buying politicians. I happen to think I'm not going to say where their influence is more. I'm not disagreeing. I just feel like the media influence of billionaires, the Rupert Murdochs and the rest is such a big deal. So those are the two things. And yeah, very, very good. Well said. Yes. Well, I hope people are aware of these and thinking about them when it comes time to consider candidates, much less their different forms of activism, local, state, or federal level, because it matters so much. I mean, don't you think, though, that Grover Norquist and that mentality that if you were a Republican, you had to sign a blood oath to never raise taxes has had the single most impactful influence on tax policy than almost anything else? And is that waning? I mean, is there anything else? It's always been Republican, conservative, anti-government orthodoxy to be anti-taxes in general, but like all the way across the board, no new taxes means roads don't get fixed.
Yeah. I think Grover Norquist, yes, has done a tremendous, tremendous harm on the country. And I don't think the influence really is waning all that much, because he is speaking out for the richest, and the richest are still investing in their politicians. So I think that, it's why we run into this problem. It's why we haven't had such a clear, like, well, at least the Republicans are saying no new taxes, but at least the Dems are pushing the actual, like, no, tax the billionaires fairly and invest in us. They haven't been because they were also getting those same campaign contributions from very rich. So their whole mindset for the extent of this was just like, well, what if we just said nothing? Oh, and then kind of went along with it and said they were the bad guys. And it worked pretty well for a while. And fortunately now, enough people are holding them accountable that the Dems are starting to take an actual opposing offensive stance. And that is what is so incredibly vital and important. So as people are listening, and if they are riled up, and I know so many people here that listen to your show do so many things, and it is incredible. And another thing that you can just throw in, especially if you're already reaching out to your own representatives, is ask, have you endorsed the billionaire's minimum income tax? Because that is a piece of legislation that they can put their names on right now. We can get enough on board that we can actually introduce this and start really pushing policy. Now, we're in a divided place, so I don't see things necessarily going through, but now is the time to hold, especially your Democratic House members, to the fire on this. Like, okay, we might not have a vote on it right now, but put your name on it. Let me know where you stand, because we want to push on this the moment we can. And I want to know that you are supportive and you are actively on board with moving legislation that's going to make the rich pay their fair share.
Now, I'm Harlan Crow, and I do not like this at all. Young lady, sweetheart.
Do you think the Crows are mad? Are they like, oh, come on, dude. Like, you could have picked something else. Like, I would be pissed off. I'd be like, I would be constantly, as a Crow, being like, not related to that guy. Because
of why? Because it is, why would his relatives not like him?
No, I mean actual crows.
Oh.
No, I mean the birds.
I thought you meant, why you, I think the Crow family's probably pretty psyched with old Harlan's sponsorship of Clarence Thomas, amongst other.
I'm investing a lot of emotional background into a non-human group of animals that I have a personal affinity for. Yeah.
Oh, is that right? There's a real bird theme today. Your dad was always excited about robins, but when you see a crow...
The thing, I hate birds.
Oh.
I hate them.
Oh, why?
I hate birds.
Why do you hate birds? What kind of a person? Did a bird hurt you? Were you jogging one day and a bird saw your ponytail bouncing and it attacked you? I know that's
jogging
happened.
One day. No, I've never been jogging one day. That's not like, never.
Sorry, I forgot.
No,
I was talking to a non-jogger.
No, I do not jog. No, I'm the sort of person, like, when people are like, oh, I never run unless chased. Mine like, no, I never run. Like,
so
if you
even if someone
were dead, that's fine.
Even if
I accept that. What am I going to try and run for?
Even if they were an assailant and they were screaming, I'm going to kill you, Maura.
Let me go out with some dignity, and running would not be the dignified way for me to end.
Right.
Yeah.
I understand. Okay. Well, good for the public to know. What do you think? I just read this editorial in today's. I saw this editorial today's Lyric Tabs. Maybe it was yesterday's. Lydia Polgreen wrote about how all the anti-trans stuff is really not winning for politicians. it's not a really winning message. And she uses a lot of statistics and election outcomes and so on. And then you see them, the latest thing is they're shooting the Bud Light can because Bud Light put a trans woman on it or something. And I wonder what you think about that issue and how much it's animating people or not. She says it's really not a winner. In Wisconsin, it wasn't a winner, and in other elections as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the right has always done one thing really well. And what they've done really well is demonizing groups of people and then pointing their base at those groups and saying, we can protect you from this dangerous group of people.
Well said.
And I'm not sure why they I know they haven't moved on from it being immigrants, but I'm not sure why they've decided immigrants wasn't enough. We need more, except other than the fact that they will always need more. They will always be bringing new groups into the hatosphere of groups that need to be targeted. And with trans people, I think it's, it is a way for them to I think they feel a bit of the loss of not being able to target the entirety of the LGBTQIA plus community. They feel like they already lost that one. So I think that trans being so narrow and being such a tiny, tiny, minute portion of the population means that while they can't sort of do this hate preaching towards just sort of gay people anymore, because most of their base knows some gay people and they're not so bad, and so-and-so's daughter married a woman,
and a ton of them that are anti-gay are actually gay.
Yeah,
not that ever stopped.
They kind of couldn't. I think they felt that door being closed on them, and they just wedged a little trans foot right in it before it slammed shut. And now they are trying to use this minute population because most people will go, well, I don't know anything about trans people. I only know what Tucker Carlson tells me, and he tells me they're coming for me and my kids, so I gotta get my guns. They can kind of get away with it more because they don't have a lot of opposing information coming at them. And I think it's really just they're just trying to get that door back open, and this was a really convenient way to try and go at it.
I have I think that's all really thoughtful. I thought right while you're talking that it's much more of a media thing than it is an election thing or a politician thing, meaning it's usually this isn't the case, or often it isn't the case. It's definitely getting a lot of ratings for anyone from Tucker Carlson to Joe Rogan to keep talking trans Ben Shapiro. It's killing. But when it comes to politicians making laws around it, I really feel like that's not animating voters as much as you mentioned, some of these other more traditional issues that always has. So maybe it's more of a media-driven narrative and certainly effective for them, but not as effective for election outcomes. I don't know. I'm
gonna hate myself for a half second here and do the political punditry stuff, which actually just really gets on my nerves. So if it gets on your nerves too, just mute this for a little bit.
No, I'm for it. Go for it. Let's go.
I'm saying for anyone listening, oh God. But if I were political racehorsing this stuff, I would say that on the right, you have animated such a huge base for so long over abortion, right? That's been just the absolute driving thing where you can get huge swaths of people to say, we don't even care who the guy is. If he's promising to get rid of abortion, that's who we're going to be for. You have this tremendous evangelical population that has made that their thing, their rallying cry thing. And I think that now that they have moved on abortion and are effectively making abortion completely inaccessible for vast majorities of the country, and seeing that is a political loser overall, right? Most of the country
places it would certainly seem, yes.
Yeah, it is not good for them. But they can't keep yelling about abortion because it's alienating people, it's pushing them away. But they also can't change their position on abortion because that's so much of their base. So they have to keep moving on abortion. But right now, what they need is that sparkly hand to put up in the air and go, no. This isn't free. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about what we're doing. Abortion. Shush. Hey, we got something else for you. Trans people. Hey, I think that it is they're trying it out as this thing that they can use to kind of draw that anger and hate, because that's what it's all about. But, draw it away from the abortion stuff because they know that they're actually passing laws on that, and that's pissing people off. And they're trying to maneuver this thing where they can still grab a hold of the fear and the anger, but then move on unpopular policies. And it's I think it's becoming a little bit of a mess for them, because I think they were really hoping that the trans hate would be a political winner. I think it's not, but they've done this enough and have had enough success that if you just keep hating, you can probably bring it around. You can probably start to actually brainwash enough people into violent fear, which is the route we're headed. And that's, I'm horrified, in a constant state of being horrified. Yeah. And of course, everybody, I think probably who's listening to this podcast, stream would know, but it's just one of those reminders where they're never going to stop. It's not going to stop at any one group. They are coming for your group next, whoever you are, whatever it is you do. They absolutely are. They have to
come for the Knights of Columbus.
I don't know.
I think they might be the Knights of Columbus. No, I kid the Knights of Columbus. I'm sure you're not MAGA Nation, right? Bunch of old Catholic guys, Catholic Italian guys. Sure you're not.
It's a scary time.
Yeah, it is definitely a scary time. I appreciate your thoughts, your punditry on it. What was my last question for you?
I bet it was so great. Was it about birds?
Yes. If you could come back as any bird, despite your fear and hatred of them, what bird would you want to be? And obviously, you can't choose turkey vulture, because why?
Well, I was going to say, what's the scariest bird? What would be the most intimidating? Really?
Turkey vulture.
If you're out in the world as a person, though, I want to scare people.
Turkey vulture.
Okay, I'm not going to be a turkey vulture just because I don't want turkey in my name. That just sounds, again, very undignified. I'm not okay with that.
Okay.
And you know what? Honestly, what am I doing here? I'd be an owl. There's no question. I'd be an owl. It's
Oh, of course you would be.
You'd think a seabird, but it wouldn't be. It'd just be an owl who wished that she lived closer to the ocean.
Of course. Maura Quint, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Maura Quint always wishes that she lived closer to the ocean. That's her happy spot. All right, well, that was great. Love talking to her. Always so honest and hilarious at the same time, and super smart. So I'm always grateful when she joins me here on Stand Up. And I'm always grateful when you join me. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. I so appreciate you, and I'm so grateful to you for listening to the show whenever you do, as much as you do, and especially to those of you that pay for it, because while it's free, it's really expensive, and it's a lot of work every day. I put a lot into it. Always trying to find new things to do. Give me your ideas. I'm going to have a survey for everybody pretty soon to fill out. To help along with that, thanks to longtime listener Jim Babowski, who lit that fire and basically wrote it up for me. I'll be talking more about that later this week. But that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you will come back tomorrow and tell your friends as well. Today's inspiring quote comes from Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." Oh, I like that one. Do what you can with what you have where you are. All right, I'm going to go do it. Thanks, Ted. Jon Carroll, take us away.
You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. You got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.